The president's economic agenda pending in the Senate claims two political casualties, both Republicans who can no longer stomach MAGA Washington. Senate Democrats are slowing but not defeating Trump's tax bill. We'll ask Michigan Democrat Alyssa Slacken what is to be gained from the delay. Question: who turns down a presidential pardon? Answer: someone who feels remorse for her role in the Capitol riot. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. It is great to be back. Tom Tillis and Don Bacon are not political rock stars. They don't burn up social media or appear day and night on cable TV. They keep, by Washington standards, a low and often bipartisan profile. As Republicans, this makes them rare, and as it turns out, burned out. Tillis, a two-term senator from North Carolina, announced this weekend he will not seek re-election. Bacon, a five-term congressman from Nebraska, announced the same today. Tillis opposes President Trump's economic bill, arguing it cuts Medicaid too deeply and will harm hundreds of thousands in North Carolina. Bacon told the Wall Street Journal today he's not sure if he will support the president's cherished bill. His retirement, however, gives him flexibility to incur Trump's wrath, something that Bacon, like Tillis, has done before, despite siding with Trump's agenda nearly all of the time. But nearly all is not all. And that gap, however small, irritates the president, provokes threats of a primary and ensuing political strife that for Tillis and Bacon just isn't worth it. Not anymore. All of this, in due course, will be overtaken by the fate of the economic bill itself, which is going through a lengthy series of votes on the Senate floor as we speak. And for the latest on that, we turn, quite literally, to Caitlin Huey Burns on Capitol Hill. Caitlin, first of all, thanks for anchoring in my absence. You did a splendid job. Catch us up on what's going on in the Capitol.
Well, Major, I can personally attest that you have very, very large shoes. I don't know if our audience can see them, but your shoes are very large. I know in my experience trying to fill them. But congratulations to you and your family on a wonderful wedding that I know was wonderful. Here in the Capitol, it has been a day of everybody hanging out on the Senate floor. And what I mean by that is, over the weekend, they voted to proceed with this bill, and now it's amendment time. Here in the Senate, it's called Vote-a-rama. I personally don't like that word, but that's what it's called. And that's basically where lawmakers have the chance to propose any sort of amendment that they want and see if it gets through. Now, for Democrats, that means putting messaging bills on the floor and trying to get their Republican colleagues on the other side to be on record on certain issues. For Republicans, for some Republicans at least, it includes making fixes to the bill. Some amendments are going to be targeted at Medicaid, some at the tax components, some at clean energy credits. And then others are adding some of their kind of wish list items that they know will not likely make it through, but also ways to put Democrats on record. So that is all happening now. It's been going on all day. It's going to go on through the wee hours of tomorrow morning. And Senate aides tell us that they're expecting a vote, final passage on this tomorrow. But the big question, as you well know, is what happens next when it has to go back to the House.
So, Caitlin, I want to refer to a graphic we have made about the newest Congressional Budget Office estimates of what this bill in the Senate, if it became law, would do to the deficit over the next 10 years. $3.3 trillion added. And in that context, I want to read to you something that Elon Musk, someone we continuously talk about on this program, just posted. Every member of Congress who campaigned on reducing government spending and then immediately voted for the biggest debt increase, that's also in this legislation, should hang their head in shame, and they will lose their primary next year if it's the last thing I do on this earth. That from Elon Musk. So Musk now engaging yet again in criticism of this bill and its implications, not just for the deficit, but for the increase in the debt ceiling.
That's right, Major. And, we have seen Musk weigh in on these sorts of measures before, try to blow it up at the last minute, put some Republicans on edge, twist their arms a little bit. But this is the first time that we are seeing this come from him as he is kind of outside the president's inner circle at this point, meaning he no longer is working at the White House. And I can tell you, just talking to Republicans up here and Republican operatives as well, it's more Donald Trump that has the power over these lawmakers. But Musk has the money. And in some cases, these lawmakers want that kind of money in their races. In others, they feel like he has a toxic brand and don't necessarily want his name stamped all over them. So whether this tweet from Musk and this threat, and I call it a threat because we have to wait and see if he does, in fact, put his money where his mouth is, whether that does sway Republicans at this point. But according to my reporting and my conversations, they're likely more beholden to President Trump and not as much Musk, because they like to point out that their constituents voted for Trump and not the billionaire. The other one.
Huey Burns on Capitol Hill. Thank you so much. I want to turn now to Nancy Cordes on the North Lawn of the White House. Caitlin, Huey Burns just referred to the President of the United States, the political driving force behind this legislation. What is the perspective there?
Well, they're still hoping, Major, that somehow the House and Senate can manage to pass this by the July 4th recess, but they're not exactly drawing a line in the sand. They're trying to keep the pressure on by continuing to say that, yes, they'd like to see this get done by the end of the week. But the president has already implied, look, if they need more time to figure this out, obviously they're going to need to take it. What they are encouraging Republicans to do, however, is to stand strong. In fact, Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, a couple hours ago put it this way. She said the president wants Republicans to stay tough and unified. And as much as Elon Musk is warning them that he might find a primary opponent and finance that primary opponent for Republicans who vote yes, you've also got the president making his own threats this weekend, saying that he will support primary opponents for Republicans who vote no, like Tom Tillis of North Carolina, who then was prompted to come out and say, as you pointed out at the beginning of your broadcast, that actually he's not going to run again and therefore is impervious to those kinds of threats from the President of the United States.
Picking up on that, Nancy, I want to play for our audience sound from Tom Tillis about Medicaid cuts and a response from Caroline Leavitt at today's briefing at the White House.
Republicans are about to make a mistake on health care and betraying a promise. It is inescapable that this bill in its current form will betray the very promise that Donald J. Trump made.
He is just wrong. And the president and the vast majority of Republicans who are supportive of this legislation are right. This bill protects Medicaid.
So, Nancy, that is the White House perspective. It protects Medicaid, but Tillis said he's run the numbers. He's looked at the implications for North Carolina specifically and believes tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, in that state will lose care that they are currently receiving.
And according to the Congressional Budget Office, he's right, Major. The CBO is predicting that 7 million Americans will lose Medicaid coverage over the next 10 years under this plan. Another 4 million could lose their Obamacare coverage because of a couple major provisions in this bill. One that lowers the amount of taxes that states can levy on healthcare providers to help them pay for Medicaid coverage in their states. That's one of the things that Tillis is very concerned about. And then there is another major provision that says that people on Medicaid who are otherwise healthy or who have older children have to meet certain work requirements. Now, the White House press secretary and many Republicans say that's just good governance, and this means that people can't get a free ride. But Tillis and certainly all of his Democratic colleagues are arguing that this is going to put people who have no other access to affordable health coverage out in the cold without any coverage at all. And they argue that in the long run, that is going to be costly for taxpayers because it means those people are going to be seeking coverage at emergency rooms and at the end of the day, that the American people will end up footing the bill.
Nancy, very quickly, you have some new reporting on developments regarding the Middle East.
Yes, we know that Benjamin Netanyahu, leader of Israel, will be here on Monday. Now that it appears that this ceasefire between Israel and Iran is holding, the president has turned his focus back to the crisis between Israel and Gaza. And both those leaders are saying that they're hoping that they can finalize some kind of a deal that will enable more hostages to come home soon.
Nancy Cordes, North Line of the White House, thank you very much. Senior coordinating producer for our climate unit, Tracy Wolf, joins me now to talk about changes in the Senate bill that have those in the renewable energy industry alarmed. Tracy, great to have you with us. Thanks for joining me. Why the alarm?
Well, listen, Major, the changes that have happened in this Senate bill really only benefit the fossil fuel industry. What came out over the weekend was really a surprise to quite a few people. I don't think anyone was surprised by the fact that the Senate was going to roll back tax incentives for the clean energy industry, but there was a new excise tax that was placed on the industry that some analysts are expecting could increase the cost of renewable energy for the industry itself anywhere from $4 to $7 billion by 2036. And on top of that, it's anticipated that energy costs for consumers like you and I could rise anywhere from 8 to 10% with this additional tax on top of the industry.
So to drill down on that for just a second, there's a new tax being added in addition to the removal of the tax credits and incentives. So both things are happening in this legislation if it's enacted.
Correct. I mean, already the industry was bracing for the removal of these tax credits that were passed during the Inflation Reduction Act. You know, looking at analysis of the removal of those tax incentives alone, industry experts were anticipating that you could see a decrease of solar and wind projects up to 72% just by eliminating those tax incentives that were in the IRA. But with this additional tax, it makes business pretty much impossible to be beneficial to anyone, really. I spoke to a solar industry company in New York today, and they just said, listen, this is going to de-incentivize the ability to install solar. It's going to de-incentivize anybody really wanting to do it. And this is coming at a time, as you're well aware, that we need to be putting more energy on the grid. The fastest and cheapest way to do it is with solar, wind, renewable energy, and basically all these provisions in the bill are de-incentivizing that, making it more cost prohibitive. And in looking at some of the analysis this weekend, one renewable energy expert said the only reason you would do this is because if business is so good, it's making it really bad for fossil fuel companies. And so really what it's doing, it's leveling the playing field. And let's not forget, you know, the fossil fuel industry has been subsidized for years by the federal government. So this isn't really evening the playing field. They're going to continue to get subsidies, and it's going to make it harder to do wind and solar at a time when we need to be putting as much energy on the grid as possible to keep the lights on, especially as we want to race to be the leader in AI data centers, AI technology.
With the details and the implications, as always, Tracy Wolf, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Still to come, she once proudly called herself a MAGA granny. Now she's guilty about her role in the January 6th riot. So guilty, she turned down a pardon. President Trump's economic bill will shift billions in healthcare costs to the states. I'll speak with Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont about what that could mean to state budgets. And Senate Democrat Alyssa Slacken takes a break from the Senate's merry-go-round of budget votes to talk to us right here on The Takeout. Welcome back. Great to have you with me on The Takeout. I'm joined now by Michigan Democratic Senator Alyssa Slacken. Senator, it's great to have you with us. I know you oppose the legislation, President Trump's economic agenda, but I just want to ask you some questions about things that are in it that if in isolation you would support. For example, there is a change to state and local tax deductions. In isolation, if it written and presented to you, would you support that?
You know, that's really more of like a California, New York issue.
That's not
we don't
a big
have
deal
as
for you.
big an issue. It's not a Michigan like front burner issue. So I'd have to look at the text, but it's not like I'm not going to die on that hill.
Right. $70 billion for border security.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would support
$150 billion for defense.
I'm on the Armed Services Committee. I think we need a robust defense, so I need to look at it, but certainly, yes, support for the defense.
There are differences in the House and Senate bill, but both would prevent states from passing any laws dealing with artificial intelligence. 5 years in the Senate bill, 10 years in the House. What about that?
No, if the legislature here in Washington had its you-know-what together and we were working on legislation around artificial intelligence, then fine, let the states hold while we finish our work. We're not doing our work. We're bickering up here, so the states are moving ahead, and I think I understand that, including my state.
What are your biggest problems with the bill as written?
I mean, the number one issue I have is, first of all, the full concept of the bill, which is cutting people off of health care, and raising prices for normal Americans so that we can get a tax cut to the wealthiest. And in particular, the healthcare part of this is it's devastating. We're now up to, we think, 17 million people going to be kicked off their health insurance between Medicaid, but also importantly, Obamacare. And then you just have to look at the fallout from that. If our hospitals don't have people getting, reimbursing them when they come into the ER, people are still going to have heart attacks and car accidents. They're still going into the ER. The hospitals have already said, and the insurance companies have already said, they will charge more to people who have insurance, sometimes going up January 1st by 10, 13, 15%. So you're going to have every American either at risk of losing their health care or having to pay more for their health care. And I don't know a single American who feels like they're paying too little for their health insurance. And then by attacking solar and wind energy, we know, as a society, we need more energy. So why? Like, you're attacking them because they're woke? We need all kinds of energy. I want the whole menu of energy sources. And if not, if you're cutting off wind and solar, people are going to be charged more for their energy. And again, energy bills are already too high. So this whole idea that this is for the working person, that this is a monumental bill for middle America is complete BS. And it will make people pay more in every corner of their life.
Would you vote in isolation to make permanent the 2017 Trump tax cuts?
No, I think that while there's some interesting things I'm willing to consider over there, making a tax cut for the wealthiest Americans is not what I'm here for. Let everyone pay their fair share. The guy, Jeff Bezos, who just had rented out Venice, Italy for his wedding, pays less in taxes than my mechanic. So no, I'm not gonna make those permanent.
How about tax cuts that eliminate federal taxation of tips and overtime?
Yeah, that one I think is interesting. And we voted yes in unanimous consent. Like, Democrats and Republicans voted on that in May when it came to the floor of the Senate. So yes, that's something that I can get behind.
There are also implications in both the Senate and House bill for what Washington refers to as Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It used to be called food stamps. Where do you come down?
These are major cuts to food security in America, to food stamps. Just as a reminder, food stamps right now, if you're on food stamps, you're supposed to feed your kid for $6 a day. That's what you have. And they want to cut that back. They want to cut people off assistance. And the way that they're doing it is kind of sneaky and diabolical, right? It's making people apply and reapply every 6 months so that hopefully people forget. Hopefully people get busy. Hopefully they get bogged down in other things and they just fall off the rolls instead of just owning up to it, which is a major, major cut to kids, to disabled people, and I cannot support that.
Even political junkies, and there are a great number across our country who watch the show, get a little bit fatigued with process. And I don't want to bore them with process, but what's going on right now matters. Are there amendments you think Republicans will rebel on? And if so, do you think there's any chance the Senate bill is in any form of jeopardy?
Yeah, so I do think, I know that it's in some form of jeopardy because they haven't finished writing the bill. Right now, the reason why we're taking all day to do this is because they're still writing sections of this bill, even on the same day that we're supposed to be voting for it. So any idea that my Republican colleagues have this thorough review of this bill and they know exactly what's in it is just complete, not factual, because they're still writing it as we speak. And number two, there's definitely things coming into the bill, coming out of the bill. And so some of the Republicans who have voiced real concerns about this bill, some of their things that they really want are coming out. So I don't think by any means my Republican colleagues have the votes on everything right now. Otherwise, they'd be speeding us through this. They'd be moving us very quickly. Instead of they're taking their time because they know they don't have the votes yet.
Not so long ago, Senator Slotkin, Elon Musk was the face of rapacious oligarchs working alongside President Trump. Now he's an avowed critic of this legislation, not just on renewable energy and its implications for electric vehicles, but also the increase in the debt ceiling and its implications for the deficit. Are you now a newfound fan of Elon Musk?
You know, I've had this happen a few times in the last month or so. It's like, what happens when someone you're not a big fan of does something you like, right? It really forces that quandary for all of us. And I have no love lost for Elon Musk, but he's calling a spade a spade. The two things that he's really focused on are, number one, the killing of solar energy, wind energy, tax credits for things like EVs, that he knows, like, in an environment where we need more energy, this is just a bad idea. That's number one. The other thing he said is, for Republicans who literally campaign on lowering the debt, this is going to raise the debt precipitously, and there's no disagreement about that. So for people who have spent their whole careers, my Republican colleagues, saying bad debt, and I agree with them, this is raising the debt. So he's been focused on those two issues, and on these two issues, I happen to agree with him.
Senator Slotkin, Democrats have been trying to delay this process. What is the point of that?
Well, the delaying process is, in very real way, giving them more time on the Republican side to pick things out that they don't like, to learn new things about the bill that in some cases they haven't read. And we're seeing that play out, right? We asked for the entire bill to be read in full. It took something like 15 hours. The Republicans did it to us a couple of years ago. So during that time, we saw furious negotiations. We had Republicans yelling at each other behind closed doors. We had Senator Tillis announce that he was not going to vote for the bill and not running again for office. So every time you give them more time to sit with their decisions, they actually come back and their coalition weakens. So the delay tactics, again, it's wonky, it's tactical, but it is actually resulting in more fragility in that final vote.
Michigan Democratic Senator Alyssa Slacken, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Accusations of anti-Semitism. The White House says Harvard violated the civil rights of Jewish students. Now, the school could lose even more federal funding. More on that next here on The Takeout. Welcome back. Here is a look at what else we and now you are watching this evening. Beyond politics tonight, we are keeping an eye on the Sean Diddy Combs trial in New York. Jury deliberations began this morning and have wrapped up for the day. The hip-hop mogul is facing life in prison if found guilty of sex trafficking and racketeering charges. When we get a verdict, we will bring it to you live right here on CBS News 24/7. President Trump has dropped his lawsuit against Des Moines Register pollster Ann Selzen. The suit was filed in response to a poll that she conducted that ran in the paper the Sunday before the 2024 election. You might remember this story, that poll had Kamala Harris leading Trump among likely Iowa voters and was, by all definitions, an outlier compared to many other surveys. Trump went on to win Iowa by 16 points. The lawsuit alleged the poll was either intentional fraud or reckless disregard for accuracy. It has now been dropped, and we can move on collectively. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says trade talks with the United States have resumed now that his government has rescinded a tax on American tech companies. President Trump had previously announced that he was, quote, terminating all discussions on trade with Canada because of that policy. It would have forced Google, Amazon, Apple, and others to pay a 3% tax on revenue earned in Canada. The Trump administration says Harvard University violated the civil rights of Jewish and Israeli students. In a letter to Harvard, the Justice Department threatened to cut all federal funding if the school failed to take remedial action. This is the latest salvo in the White House's battle with the Ivy League University, which has already lost more than $2.6 billion in federal funding. After rejecting administration demands to change campus governance, hiring policies, and admission practices. Joining me now here at the family table, White House correspondent for Notice. Remember, that's News of the U.S., Jasmine Wright. She was recently promoted to correspondent, so congratulations on that. and race and politics reporter for the Associated Press, Matt Brown. Matt, it's great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
Give me your perspective on this latest back and forth between the administration and Harvard over underlying accusations of anti-Semitism, which Harvard said it has worked very hard to address and, if not solve, certainly move in a more positive direction.
Well, absolutely. As we all know, there has been a very substantive debate over the last couple of years over how universities and other elite institutions can properly address anti-Semitism in this country. And Harvard has said in many statements and in a report that they have themselves put out that they could have done better in handling many of the protests and campus climate that the university experienced over the last couple of years. There's also this separate question over debates over academic freedom and the Trump administration's entire relationship with the American university system at large.
And using threats or investigations and holding things over universities' heads to get them to change things. The president of University of Virginia resigned on Friday just over the threat of an investigation related to diversity, equity, inclusion. Exactly. That goes to that point.
Exactly. And this broader debate that the Trump administration is having with the American academia at large comes in with this letter in the same context. So there are many things that they cited in this letter that many Jewish and Israeli students at Harvard and in the Harvard community have said what the campus climate was like for them and what concerns that they had, but that also the discourse here is within this broader context of, is the Trump administration acting in good faith? And if they're going to suspend funding for Harvard, is that going to be a conversation that Harvard can actually engage with the administration on, or is this just going to have to go to court?
And of course, Jasmine, one of the reasons there is a back and forth in this is Harvard is fighting back, unlike other institutions which tried to negotiate a settlement.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody close to Trump just today, and I asked them, is Harvard the example of what happens when you push back against Donald Trump as a university? And they said, yes, it is. Yes, they do want Harvard to do more, right? They want them to commit to merit-based acceptance policy, something that Harvard doesn't want to do. They want them to be more stringent on prosecuting against people who may be anti-Semitic, something that Harvard says that they're interested in doing. But they also want them to invest more in trade schools, something that Harvard isn't not interested in, but they don't want necessarily be forced to do it. Still, though, this is the administration, just as they're doing across the board on all different industries, saying you either play ball and behave, as Donald Trump has said multiple times, or this is what you get, the full might of the federal government against you, basically whittling you down until you are forced to make a deal. So yes, these anti-Semitic claims are very serious on Harvard's campus, but it is also a way to put more pressure on Harvard to make a deal with the president,
and to
something
send
that he
signal
wanted
to
to
academia nationwide.
To don't try it.
Matt, you had some very interesting reporting that caught my eye and our eye about oversight, which is a congressional, constitutionally protected inquiry into what the executive branch is doing, and how it has led to arrests for Democrats trying to carry out what they say are legitimate oversight activities.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, just in the past couple of weeks, we've seen not just arrests, but prosecution of a sitting member of Congress for attempting to conduct oversight at a facility in her district. So what you've seen there with the situation with Representative LaMonica McIver, with Senator Alex Padilla, and I should also say many other Democratic lawmakers, mostly in states and cities across the country, is the Trump administration basically saying that, especially on immigration, this is not an issue that we are going to negotiate on, especially at ad hoc in their view, appearances at ICE facilities or appearances at federal buildings even.
And if you do anything that could be construed as bumping into or touching someone with immigration's customs and enforcement, that will be interpreted as abuse or some sort of assault, and prosecutorial charges will be raised.
Or if you simply walk into a press conference and announce yourself as a senator, but don't necessarily give a tone that the administration likes to agree with, that would immediately, apparently, put you in handcuffs in this situation. So those are the situations that we're seeing all across the country.
How are Democrats absorbing this particular moment?
Well, the first thing that a lot of them have done is speak with legal counsel, both in officially the House of Representatives and the Senate, but then also personal legal counsel to make sure that they can be protected from whatever charges the government or Trump and his allies could bring to them. The second thing that they've done is figure out what are back channels and other conversations that we can be having with, other lawmakers across the country, the business community, activists and advocacy groups to both track what's going on inside of this administration, but then also, use the bully pulpit to shed light on this, because the Trump administration is, really in formalities not having a lot of front office channels with many of these Democrats. So they're having to figure out other ways to conduct oversight and other ways to critique and gain basic insights into what's going on inside the administration.
Jasmine, it's worth reminding ourselves that Congress passed, President Biden signed a ban on TikTok that was to go into effect the beginning of this year. Mm-hmm. It has been delayed and delayed and delayed. And over the weekend, President Trump made some possible news. I emphasize the word possible in regards to a sale of TikTok. Let's listen.
We have a buyer for TikTok, by the way. I think I'll need probably China approval. I think President Xi will probably do it.
Who's buying?
I'll tell you in about 2 weeks.
A big technology company there.
Very, very wealthy people. It's a group of very wealthy people.
First of all, there's that time tick of President Trump's. Everything is 2 weeks from now. Anything that's pending, check with me in 2 weeks. Okay, whatever. 2 weeks. This sounds like something potentially promising, but it's all very amorphous and vague and full with probablys.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's kind of how the president rolls, right? He thinks he has a deal, and then he, gives a time frame, and then he may or may not hit a deal. Deadlines really mean nothing to him unless he says that they do, and even then they may not. Certainly, this has been an ongoing issue for the White House as they've tried to seek at least a buyer of a company or a coalition of buyers, talking to multiple tech companies, talking to multiple people in and out of the White House. Sometimes, of course, we know that these visits aren't on the visitor log. They're not being public, so we don't actually know exactly the full breadth of people that he's always meeting on these issues. But, we know that people have voiced interest in this deal that he's met with, sometimes related, sometimes not. I think a great question was actually posed on this inside the briefing today, the press briefing, when somebody says, Donald Trump says you have a buyer, but do you have a seller? The major question mark has been whether or not China is actually going to sell, if they're going to acquiesce to the full government, not just the White House, but certainly concerned Republicans and concerned Democrats' requests to sell this Bing to keep it operational in the U.S., and we really haven't gotten a clear answer from China about where they are. And so I think that Donald Trump can say that he is a buyer, and he could actually potentially have a buyer.
Right.
This is ultimately going to be up to President Xi and whether or not he's going to grant the permission to sell. And then beyond that, how much of the stake of the company does China get to keep? And what of the formulations that they use, all the ways that TikTok gathers information, what will China still be able to keep their hands on?
Who owns the algorithm and the data?
Exactly. Those are the two words.
Jasmine Wright. Matt Brown, thank you so much. I appreciate it very much. From Capitol Hill to state capitals, how President Trump's budget bill could leave states with the bill. Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont joins me next for that and much more here on The Takeout. Welcome back. We are keeping an eye, as you might expect, on the Senate floor, where the process of voting on amendments continues. I know those are not the most fascinating pictures, lots of senators walking around, milling about, but that's what's going on. We're going to keep an eye on that. That's all about the president's budget bill. I'm now joined by Connecticut's Democratic Governor Ned Lamont for more on how this bill might or might not affect his state. So, Governor, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining me. Two questions off the top. What are the implications in Connecticut for the Medicaid changes in this legislation? And you've recently paved the way for, if I have my notes correctly, universal pre-K. How would any effect to your budget through Medicaid alter or hamper that universal pre-K initiative you just started?
All right, Major, great to see you. Medicaid is a big worry for all 50 states. 40-50% of our babies are born under Medicaid. So every time they're talking about shifting a lot of costs to the states, we have to impact that. I thought DOGE was going to go out there and get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse in the Medicaid system. Nope, all they're going to do is shove it on the backs of the states. So we're monitoring that very carefully. Make sure, and they all say, I want to get able-bodied folks. Most of our folks on Medicaid are working. The problem is they don't really get very good health insurance where they are. So we're trying to take care of people. I think getting people off of Medicaid and off of health insurance is a terrible way to save money. Yeah, on the Child Care Trust Fund, it's a big deal. We're going to have universal early childhood for all of our kids, free of charge for parents, up to $100,000. We made a down payment on that this year. The Medicaid thing doesn't impact that as much. We're doing that ourselves, but give these kids the very best head start in life. You know, it also lets mom and dad get back to work.
Governor, why don't you make some news for me? You going to run for re-election?
I'll let you know soon enough. I'll let you know soon enough. I love the job. I think the state was flat on its back, looking at yawning deficits just 7 or 8 years ago. We got a lot of work to do. We're just getting started.
So as you know, last week there was a primary in New York City. Zohran Mamdani won. One of his big issues was housing and affordability. You just vetoed a piece of legislation that a lot of people thought had been negotiated with your office. What's going to be the future of housing legislation in Connecticut, and how do you read Zohran Mamdani's victory in New York City, with that issue being a driving force?
I think he is a big deal. I think he's transformative. I love what he's doing on a universal pre-K for everybody. Same thing that we're doing right here. Talking about free bus service for folks. We did that all during COVID as well. But you're absolutely right. Affordable housing is the biggest key to affordability in our state, and I think across the country. There's a bill out there right now that I did veto, but we're going to bring it back in a better form, make sure the towns are taking the lead. But we need more housing. It's not just affordable housing, it's workforce housing and housing for single people. You know, 30% of people live alone these days. That wasn't the case when you and I were younger, but it is now. So we got to make sure we have housing that meets the market.
You were supportive of Andrew Cuomo. Are you now supportive of Zohran Mamdani in New York?
I just said that I had worked with Andrew Cuomo when he was governor, so I can work with whoever the next mayor is. And that's Mamdani. Absolutely. I look forward to working with him. The first call he's going to get from us. Look, New York City is the financial capital of the world. And Stamford, Connecticut, and Southern Connecticut are a big piece of that ecosystem. We have to work together closely.
What is your position, Governor, on these Senate changes? We've talked about a good deal in the program today, dealing with renewable energy, not just ending tax credits and subsidies, but applying a new tax to the renewable energy industry. Any implications for Connecticut there?
I think it's insane. Look, we need more generation. We need more electricity here in New England. That's one of the reasons we have relatively high electric costs. And wind and solar renewables are one way that we can actually add on power ourselves. So this is a bad time to be cutting back on the credits. And I just don't like the herky-jerky nature. The credits are on, the credits are off. I come out of the business world. That's no way to run a railroad. That's no way to get solar power on our roofs.
What about the bill's treatment of state and local tax deductions? Are you in favor of what Republicans are trying to accomplish there?
Yeah, it was just a money grab under the first Trump administration where they ended the deductibility for state and local. That was very costly to us. So I'm happy to see this, back in this bill, revising that. But I do worry about the size of the deficit. There's not one Republican in Washington can say they are a fiscal conservative. They have put that out to rest. So I really want them to make sure they have a bill that's more or less in balance anyway, not to mention reduce the debt over a period of time.
Governor, you told me that the good people of Connecticut will know soon if you're running for re-election. Define soon.
I'll let you know. I'll let you know.
I gave it a try. Governor Ned Lamont, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much, sir.
Nice to see you, Major.
She was once known as a MAGA granny, or maybe the MAGA granny. But now this January 6th defendant is declining a presidential pardon from President Trump, leader of the MAGA movement. We'll ask her why and tell you who has commended her since then when we come back. Welcome back. On his first day back in office, President Trump granted a pardon or clemency to more than 1,500 people convicted of offenses related to the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot. This includes our next guest, but unlike others, she turned down her pardon. Her name is Pam Hempill, and she joins me now. Pam, it's great to have you with us. Thanks for joining me. Why did you turn it down?
Thanks for inviting me.
Why did you turn it down?
Well, because I don't want to be a part of Trump's narrative that the DOJ is weaponized against him and all the J6ers because it's propaganda. It's not true. Who wants to be a part of that narrative?
Do you still consider yourself in any way part of the MAGA movement?
No, absolutely not. No way. That's a cult.
How were you drawn into it, and how did your perspectives on the 2020 election evolve?
Well, they constantly gaslight you no matter what you ask them. Where can I get information about the election being stolen? And then, of course, everybody, admires Giuliani, and Giuliani wouldn't be out there lying. But they always gaslight you and say, oh, Pam, I don't care what you read out there. It's not true. They lie to you about everything. The Democrats want to turn this into a communist nation. And the deep state, they talked a lot about the deep state, which I know now the deep state is Project 2025. But they just gaslight you over and over. And you start second guessing your own thoughts, your own feelings of how you feel about it and what you're thinking about it. You start looking up to them and go, well, they're smarter than me. They know more. Just trust them.
You got a letter recently from former Vice President Mike Pence. It read in part, your honorable decision, there it is. Oh, show it again, Pam. That's all right. Show it again. Speaks volumes about your commitment to the rule of law, and I wanted to pass along my genuine respect. How did that feel?
Oh, well, at first I thought it might be something that just wanted me to donate to some kind of organization. So I thought, well, I don't even want to open it. I was going to tear it up. But I opened it. I thought, well, maybe it's a good cause. Let me see what they're wanting. And I looked at it and I said, this can't be real. So I gave it to my boyfriend. I said, look at this. This can't be real. It's not real. And he kept looking at it himself and looked at the envelope. And I was so excited. I couldn't hardly breathe. And he says, no, this is real. This is real. Then I started crying because it's been so hard to forgive myself for ever being there that day on January 6th. It's hard to forgive yourself. But it was like, I looked at it and I said, I think I can move on. And I'm going the right direction. A part of me felt like it's okay to forgive myself now. I don't know how to put in words, really. This man who was being threatened that day would say this to me. I love him dearly.
It's quite a journey for you, Pam, this entire conversation we've been having. The MAGA world is sort of famous, possibly infamous, for turning on those who turn away from MAGA. Has that been your experience?
Oh, I got the biggest smear campaign you could imagine. I didn't want to tell him I might come on your show because I already told him about CNN once, and they called CNN. They call everybody and say, don't platform her. She's a liar. I'm going back and forth with Tario right now, the leader of the Proud Boys, because they're put out a smear campaign. But, I don't care. I'm putting a light on their lying propaganda, and they don't like it. Well, too bad, because somebody needs to speak out and tell the truth about what really happened on January 6th. And they're going to stay a victim as long as they can keep getting money, and they got those gift sending goes. And yeah, so I don't care.
Pam Hempill, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your time very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is it for the Takeout for this Monday. Again, I'm very happy to be back. Please tune in tomorrow for my conversation with New York Democratic Congressman Richie Torres. I'll ask him about, you guessed it, Zohran Mamdani's stunning upset at the New York City mayoral primary. Stick around. The Daily Report, I'm sure you've heard of it, coming up next, right here on CBS News 24/7.